This is my presentation on pyromania. So what is pyromania as defined by the DSM-5? So pyromania is most often deliberately setting fires. Within that, you're also looking at someone who is experiencing tension or arousal around the act. There's a fascination or attraction to the fire. There's a pleasure or gratification sense with witnessing fires, setting fires, seeing what happens. The fire setting, there's no gain to the individual, right? So there's no financial gain. There's no expression of anger, attempt to conceal the activity. The person is just constantly, they're setting fires purely for the enjoyment of fire. And in addition to that, there is no impaired judgment, right? There's sound mind. And the fire setting is not reasonably explained by any other known disorder that the person may have. In terms of the ethology, the primary cause or thing linked to having pyromania is someone's upbringing. So a family history of mental health conditions was a pretty significant factor, as well as childhood trauma, physical or sexual abuse. Having below average intelligence or deficits in social skills is also a factor. People who are more kept to themselves, bullying could be a factor. Possible mood disorders, mood swings. If a person has substance abuse problems, that could be a factor or something they use to numb the feeling or the urge to set fires. There is some genetic predisposition to fire setting tendencies. There could be, but primarily the main predisposition is family history of mental health disorders. It can be a wide variety of things. In terms of the statistics, men are 5 times more likely to have pyromania. I think that the general kind of trope in terms of media for pyromania is white men, which is pretty relevant in terms of the statistics. In terms of age, it can happen as early as the teens, so like 13, 14, or possibly as late as like mid-20s, 25, 26-ish. That's in terms of onset. Diagnosis may happen later, but that's usually when the condition is starting up or possibly diagnosed somewhere within that range. In terms of prevalence, less than 1% of the world population is affected. The same is found within the U.S. Less than 1% of the U.S. is affected. It's a very, very rare disorder. And then in terms of socioeconomic factors, it's more likely to happen in the lower income, worse family environment, exposure to violence as a child. But again, this comes back to the factor of your upbringing. That is the most critical factor in terms of developing pyromania. In terms of the nature versus nurture argument that we've seen before in this class, pyromania leans very heavily into the nurture. A child's upbringing is critical in the development of this, and more often than not, by a lot, children who grow up in worse household environment, questionable parental figures, questionable parenting, those factors often are very important in the development of pyromania. In terms of the differential diagnosis, bipolar disorder was pretty well tied to it. It can also be a coexisting condition. It may not necessarily, it could be also misdiagnosed as bipolar. Substance abuse as well. So substance abuse disorders are linked to it for a variety of reasons. Based on what I found, the main is it's an outlet to try and kind of resist the urge almost. Personality disorders, other mental health disorders. The other big one being conduct disorders, right? Rule breaking, breaking social norms, so like stealing, and kind of other adjacent activities that would be associated with more or less kind of like teenage rebellion. It's just at a more significant degree, more significant level, and it doesn't go away. That's kind of what the conduct disorder category is, and then ADHD as well. In terms of a case study that I chose was a 13-year-old girl who had ADHD. She had disruptive behavior, kind of going back to the conduct disorder as mentioned before, history of cannabis use, as well as history of fire setting. And this was over a long period of time. In terms of her younger history, she had an extensive history of trauma in terms of physical abuse from foster parents, being bullied at school. So as I discussed before, kind of that upbringing, that growing up, that nurture, that factor was a large part of it. Eventually, she was adopted by her aunt, where these kind of the rebellion continued. So things like running away, stealing, verbal aggression, even things so far as like defecating and urinating in the shower, kind of just like those kinds of activities, like I discussed before, adjacent to the conduct disorders, that was happening. And then in terms of her actual diagnosis, it came from her describing a fascination with fires, especially blue flames. One outlet she used to try and control these urges was watching videos online. One method of remedy to help kind of ease the urges of someone with pyromania was cognitive behavioral therapy, as well as finding alternative methods to kind of quench the urge. And I know that's not necessarily the best wording, considering we're talking about fire, but to find an alternate means to find that gratification, that satisfaction, finding something else, right? Less destructive. Something else that's important to be noted here is that this is not necessarily associated with an urge to hurt people. In this case study, the girl, the largest fire she ever set was a bushfire, and it was relatively contained. In terms of things that were done to help curb it and prevent it, when she was with her aunt, anything that was associated with fire setting materials, gasoline, matches, lighters, everything was removed from the house. And she was still setting fires in night, so it got to the point where she wasn't even allowed to sleep in a room alone. That's what it ended up coming to. So that's kind of the case study that I chose, and it really demonstrates the inability to stop the urge, the gratification. It's the gratification, the fascination. It is something that cannot be controlled, and it's a very compulsive issue, and that's where it comes from. In terms of treatments, medication is very questionable. The best options that I found were primarily like cognitive behavioral therapy. That's going to be the best bet in terms of treatment, because it's helping the person understand it, and find other ways to deal with the compulsion, deal with the urge, deal with that temptation, to prevent them from setting fires, continuing the dangerous behavior. Also to protect the people around them. If it's a kid, their parents could be legally responsible if they set a large fire. There could be crimes, right? Often this, I think, can also be confused with arson. Arson is a crime. This is an obsession. This is a mental disorder. The arson is just the crime that's associated with it. I believe in Criminal Minds they have an episode about a serial arsonist, and they're not the same thing. Arson is the crime. That's where you've got some kind of financial gain, maybe an insurance scam or something like that, or retaliatory behavior. This is a compulsion, an urge. There's gratification behind it. It's more than just setting a fire. There's generally no purpose to the fires. That's the biggest thing, as seen in the case study. Just randomly setting fires because it's the fascination with the fire, not the consequences or the things associated with it. Thank you.